what's the meaning of unemployment in Arabic?
البطالة.
Yes, this is unemployment. It is something good or bad. It's something very bad. It's something very negative. So when we talk about unemployment in the whole country, so it is a part of labor force which is unemployed, or that is unemployed, and it is harmful to the whole economy. The problem now, how to calculate unemployment rate. We have to follow a special standard to calculate the unemployment rate. Unfortunately, during coronavirus pandemic, the unemployment rate increased in most countries. I think as a total globally, millions, 25 millions persons lost their jobs in the world. So again, unemployment increases during a recession. So let me start with Farhana. Farhana, could you read this for me?
Yes, doctor. Recession, roughly a period in which real GDP declines for at least 2 consecutive quarters, marked by falling output and rising unemployment.
Okay, so during a recession, so we call the country enters into recession if a decline in the level of economic activities continues for at least 2 consecutive quarters or 6 months. We can say we have a problem of recession, but shorter than this, it is because of seasonal reasons, such as summer season. So what will happen during a recession? There is a shortage in aggregate demand. So business sector will react by producing less. For some of companies announce their bankruptcy. What's the meaning of bankruptcy?
إفلاس.
Bankruptcy. Okay, so they will close their door. They shut down. And they fire all their employees. So as aggregate output decreases, unemployment increases. So for example, in Skyline University, we have, let's say, just I don't know exactly, let's say we have 50 professors. If the number of students decreased sharply, there is no way for Skyline to survive unless they fire some of professors. So as output decreases, unemployment increases. Farhana, depression.
Depression, a prolonged and deep recession. The precise definitions of prolonged and deep are debatable.
Okay, what is a depression? It is a recession, but it takes a longer period of time, and it is deep or strong or painful recession. There is no precise differentiation between them. So what happened during coronavirus pandemic, some of them said it is recession, others said it is depression. Let's look at historical data. So the first one occurs during the Great Depression in 1930s. See here, the percentage change in real GDP, which is called economic growth rate. We understand how to calculate economic growth rate. Here it is minus. It is minus 8%. 8% is a huge decrease. But during recession, it is 1% or at least minus 2%. But when it becomes 8% and it takes several years, it is depression rather than recession. And here, the unemployment rate will start to increase from moderate level up to very high level. So when the unemployment rate exceeds 10%, I can say that the situation becomes so dangerous. So during a Great Depression, see here 25% of the labor force becomes unemployed. That means among each 4 families, one of them lives without salary. It is so harmful. It changed the image of the country. The number of crimes may increase. The suicide may increase. We will see the effects of unemployment later. So the number of unemployed is relative to the population, Okay, but during recession, such as the one attacks America in the beginning of the war between Iraq and Iran, in which the prices of oil increased further, it brought recession to developed countries. See here, I cannot say it is a recession because it is minus, because at least we have to achieve positive economic growth rate higher than the population growth rate. Assume the population growth rate is 2%. So if the economic growth rate is less than 2%, that means the unemployment rate will increase. So during recession, the unemployment rate starts to increase, maybe up to 10%. So see here, 9% is a high unemployment rate. And the government should focus on this problem and try to find solution by implementing fiscal and monetary policies to stimulate the economic growth rate. This is what happened during coronavirus pandemic. Also, the government of the United Arab Emirates started to feel worried about the level of economic activities, and they implement stimulus or incentives to encourage business sector to produce more and hire more. So that will decrease the unemployment rate. So during recession, the number of unemployed will increase. But see here this term, capacity utilization. Capacity utilization. What's the meaning of capacity utilization in Arabic? According to my dictionary, درجة الانتفاع من الطاقات الإنتاجية القائمة. So what's the meaning of capacity utilization? Assume Farhana has a machine producing 100 units per hour. During recession, she will not operate or run the machine up to 100 units because there is no enough demand. So she will use the machine at lower level, such as, let's say, 80% or even 70%. So during recession, not only part of labor force will be unemployed, but part of capital stock will be unemployed. So the nation, private sector, spent millions of dirhams to build capital stock, to build machines. But during recession, we will not benefit totally from the existing capital stock. We will use part of them, such as 80% or 70%. So during recession, the capacity utilization tends to increase. So 100 minus 70, that means 30% of capital stock will be unemployed. So now, how to calculate unemployment rate? I need to give precise definition to some terms who should be considered as employed, who should be considered as unemployed, who should be considered as in the labor force, who should be out of the labor force. See here, we have population. We have in the United Arab Emirates, we have population. Some of them out of the labor force, such as kids. And another part in the labor force, some of them employed, other will be unemployed. So who is considered as employed? Let me see who is with me right now. So the number decreased from 23 to 15 to 15. So Maha, Reem, Umar, and Muna, Muhammad Yahya. Okay, and others. Okay, we got some names. Let me start with Maha. Maha, could you help me?
أنا دكتور.
شو اسمك؟
عمر.
Omar, the second one who will read. Omar, read this for me.
Defining and measuring unemployment. Employed, any person 16 years old or older. One, who works for pay, either for someone else or in his or her own business for one or more hours per week. Two, who works without pay for 15 or more hours per week in a family, either price, or three who has a job but has been temporarily absent with or without pay.
Okay, so see, we consider Omar as employed. We consider him as employed under some conditions. First, check his age. He should be 16 or 18 years old, according to the labor law in the country. In the United Arab Emirates, we consider someone who's 18 years old or older as employed. And second, Omar works somewhere, works in a company and receive a salary, or he has his own business. At least he should serve his own business an hour per week. But for example, Omar has a building and drained the building, but he didn't attend to serve the business. We cannot classify him as employed, even he's rich. Number two, Omar works in his family restaurant and he didn't receive salary because he can't enjoy with the profit of the family of the restaurant. But how we can consider him as employed? He should serve there, work there in the restaurant at least 15 hours per week. So even he works there as a part-time. But if Omar is absent for a reason, for 1 week, 2 weeks, with pay or without pay according to labor law, still we consider him as employed because still he has the same contract. So according to this criteria, we classify Umar as unemployed. But we classify Muhammad Yahya, who will read this for me, as unemployed. Why we consider Muhammad Yahya as unemployed? Let's see the definition. Who is unemployed? Muhammad Yahya.
Yes, unemployed, a person 16 years old or older who is not working is available for work and has made specific efforts to find work during the previous 4 weeks.
Okay, so we consider a person as unemployed. First, check his age. He should be 18 and above. He doesn't have a job right now. He's available. He's willing to join a new job. And there is an evidence. He made an effort to get a job last month, last 4 weeks. For example, he sent his CV somewhere, he attained an interview. Otherwise, we will not say Muhammad Yahya is unemployed. For example, my wife is a housewife sitting at home, but she has a desire to get a job. But because of her lack of qualifications, he didn't apply for a job somewhere. Can we consider her as unemployed? The answer, no. Why? Because she didn't make specific efforts to get a job last 4 weeks. Maybe she applied for a job a year ago and she failed, and now she's disappointed, but we cannot classify her as unemployed. Who is not in the labor force? See here, employed plus unemployed equals labor force. The population equals labor force plus not in the labor force. So again, keep in your mind, we have two equations. The first one, labor force equals employed plus unemployed. Population equals labor force plus not in the labor force. So let's see who is not in the labor force. With Maha. Maha is not with me. Let me go to Reem.
Yes, I'm with you, doctor.
Okay, Maha, help me. Not in the labor force.
Yeah, okay, not in the labor force. A person who is not looking for work because he or she either does not want a job or has given up looking.
Okay, see here, who is not in the labor force? For example, people under the age of 18, teenagers, kids are not in the labor force. People who are above than 60, according to the labor force, who are retired, not in the labor force. Now, part of the people between 18 to 60, not all of them in the labor force. Part of them not in the labor force. For example, Maha. Maha, her age is 20, but she's not in the labor force. Why? Because she is a student. She decided to study and look for a job after graduation. Somebody is in the jail. He cannot get a job right now. Or my wife is a housewife. She doesn't want to work. She likes to serve her family, so not in the labor force. What is labor force? Employed plus unemployed. So now we have two important formulas. How to calculate unemployment rate, how to calculate labor force participation rate. If you understand two these equations, almost we finished this chapter. The most important slide in this chapter, this slide. And two equations are so easy. Let's go to Reem Khamis.
Yes, doctor. Unemployment,
yes.
the ratio of the number of people employed to the total number of people in the labor force.
Okay, so what is unemployment rate? A part of labor force that is unemployed. So a percentage of unemployed to labor force as a percentage. So let me ask you a question. Assume the number of unemployed 20 and the number of employed 180. What will be the unemployment rate? Again, the number of unemployed 20, the number of employed 180. What will be the unemployment rate?
11.
Your answer is wrong.
Doctor, I think we should
Yeah.
divide the 20 by 180 plus 20 so that we can get the labor force. And
So
then we
give me, use your calculator and give me the result.
because I don't have calculator, I wanted to share.
Okay.
But the process is right, Doctor?
What's your name?
Lana.
Lana, well done. So as Lana said, first we have to calculate labor force. Labor force equals employed plus unemployed. 180 plus 20 equals 200. Then 20 divided by 200 times 100 equals 10%. Equals 10%. So the unemployment rate is 10%. Let's go to Muna. Muna, Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام دكتور.
Labor force participation rate.
Okay. The ratio of the labor force to the total population 16 years old or older.
Okay. So what is labor force participation rate? Labor force divided by population times 100. So what is population? According to the question, if I give you population in general, use the population. If I give you population at the age of 16 or 18 years and above, use the population as in the question. So what is labor force participation rate? Part of population who is in the labor force. For example, 60% of population is in the labor force, while 40 are out of the labor force because they are kids or teenagers. We will give more explanation in a moment about these two formulas, but now at least keep in your mind how to calculate them in this very easy way. See this question. Let's go, for example, 1982. Population at the age of 16 and above, this number. And this number is labor force. Calculate for me number of people not in the labor force. At least give me the equation. So here population, here labor force. What is how to calculate not in the labor force?
Population minus labor force.
So population 170 minus 110 equals almost, let's say, 60. So this is out of labor force. So see here, number of employed, let's say it's close to 100. What is how to calculate the number of unemployed? Calculate the number of people who are unemployed.
Labor force minus employee.
yes, labor force 110 minus employed, let's say 100, so equals 10, which is the number of unemployed. How to calculate unemployment rate? We got 9.7%. Let me see whether this equation is correct. So the number of unemployed, 10.7, divided by the labor force, 110.2, equals times 100 times 100. So equal 9.7. How to calculate labor force participation rate? Here it is 64%. 64%. So we have to divide labor force
over population
divided by population equals times 100 as percentage. So it is around 64 after rounding, 64. So it is correct. What else? See here, over time from 1950s till today, unemployment rate fluctuated, goes up further from around 2% to 10% and goes down. Why the unemployment rate fluctuated? Because of the business cycle. When the country enters into recession, unemployment rate increases. When the country enters into expansion, the unemployment rate decreases. So sometimes the phase of the recession is long or short. So we expect fluctuations in the level of unemployment rate. But also, it seems to be, it's never to see zero unemployment rate. Unfortunately, it is impossible for unemployment rate to reach zero. Why? We will see the answer later. So expect there is a minimum level of unemployment, such as 3%. Even the performance of the whole economy is quite good. There is a minimum level. So unemployment is inevitable, cannot be avoided. And the answer later. The labor force participation rate from 1950s in America up to today increases slightly, gradually, from, let's say, from 58 up to 66. So the labor force participation rate tends to increase slightly over time due to civilization. This is in my mind, civilization, modernization of the country. Let's apply this in the UAE. So 40 years ago and today, the country becomes more modern. See here, I don't know if you remember, I remember this in Iraq. In the old days, we don't accept for girls to go to the school. And then the culture changed. We accept girls to go to the school. And then we don't accept girls to go to the marketplace to work with boys in mixed places. And then we accept for ladies to go to the marketplace. But we have still lots of housewives. But in America, people cannot survive sitting at home. So most ladies go jobs. So because of modernization, this is the trend. This is the trends. Think about number of ladies who has jobs right now with as percentage with 30 years ago. The percentage increased. So for this reason, some ladies who were out of the labor force becomes an active part of the labor force. For this reason, we expect labor force participation rate to increase as the country makes more progress culturally, number one, as the country becomes more modern. See here, I said the unemployment rate in America in 1982 is around 11%. This percentage is not the same among different demographic groups. What is the best category and what is the worst category in America? The best category, if you belong to women, white women are luckier. White women with experience, white women with qualifications are luckier to get jobs. For this reason, the unemployment rate is the least level. But the unemployment rate among white who are younger or less qualifications, the unemployment rate more than 20%. What is the worst category? African American and young with lack of experience. Half of them will be unemployed. So we can apply this. Do you know, I suggest unemployment as a hot topic for master or even PhD thesis. Unemployment in the United Arab Emirates is a hot topic. You can collect data and analyze the data and suggest policies to eliminate unemployment. So do you think unemployment rate is equal between men and women? It's not necessarily. Is it equal between people older and with no experience, such as fresh graduates? It's not necessarily. Do you know, I feel a bit happy because I lost my job in June 2020, mainly because of Corona pandemic. And within 3 months, I got another job. I got another job in a Skyline. Why? Mainly, most probably, because of my long experience, my heavy qualifications. So Skyline accepted me easily. But if a young one applied for a job during this time, the competition will be so high, so it will be more difficult to get a job. Do you think unemployment rate among citizens or expatriates is higher? So this is also another discussion. Also, I said the unemployment rate in America in 1982 is around 11%. This percentage is not the same among different cities. What is the best city? Look at the lowest unemployment rate in Texas. So the economy of Texas seems to be more dynamic. What is the worst city to get employed? Look at the highest unemployment rate. I think it is 15% in Michigan. So Michigan is the worst. So I think make comparison between Dubai and Sharjah or Dubai and Abu Dhabi, the unemployment rate is not the same. In which emirate the unemployment rate is higher? So this topic is hot, needs to be analyzed through master or PhD thesis. So almost we reach, I don't know whether I can finish this slide today or not. So now we will not enter a new formula, but we will enter a new concept. First, discouraged worker, disappointed worker. What's the meaning of discouraged, disappointed, upset?
محبط.
Well done.
محبط.
Okay, so discouraged worker, somebody who used to work somewhere and then he lost his job, he became unemployed, and later he grew to be discouraged worker. What's the meaning of discouraged worker? He's unemployed and has a negative feeling that it is difficult to get a job. So he's sitting at home, not looking for a job, such as my wife. So I can call her as discouraged worker because she has a dream to get a job, but she's disappointed because she feels it's very difficult for her to get a job. Let me go to Lane.
Yes, doctor.
Could you help me with this paragraph?
Okay, doctor. Discouraged worker effect. The decline in the measured unemployment rate that results when people who want to work but cannot find jobs grow, discouraged and stop looking, thus dropping out of the ranks of the unemployed and the labor force.
Okay, so see here, what is the effect of discouraged worker? So assume before this phenomena, before the increase of the number of discouraged worker, we calculated the unemployment rate and we found it 10%. Do you remember the example? 20 divided by 200, 20 is unemployed, 200 labor force times 100. So the unemployment rate is 10%. So assume now 4 of those 20 unemployed, 4 of them grow to be discouraged. They stopped looking for a job. What will happen to the unemployment rate? When those 4 persons grow to be discouraged, that means they stopped looking for a job. They stopped looking for a job. When they stopped looking for a job, we cannot consider them as unemployed anymore. Who is unemployed? A person who made specific efforts to get a job. He sent his CV, he attended interview. But if he's sitting at home, discouraged, disappointed, we will not consider him as unemployed. He will be or she will be considered as out of labor force. Recalculate the unemployment rate. Consider 4 of them are discouraged. So decrease the number of unemployed from 20 minus 4, it will be 16. Since unemployed is part of the labor force, decrease the number of labor force by 4, it will be 196. So calculate the unemployment rate, it is 8%. So this is formal unemployment rate. Unemployment rate seems to be less, but socially, politically, you should keep in your mind the unemployment rate is much higher than 8%, because under the criteria of calculation, there are lots of people who are unemployed, suffering from unemployment, and they have a strong desire to get a job. But formally, we consider them as out of labor force. Let me give you an example. So now the unemployment rate is 8%. The country enters into expansion. The country enters into expansion. And 4 persons who were discouraged changed their opinion. They found it is now a good opportunity to apply for a job. Assume now the vaccine works well and there is no more coronavirus pandemic. So my wife feels happy that the economic life returns to normality and there's an activation in the market. So my wife will start applying for a job. What will happen to the unemployment rate at this moment? So when discouraged workers started looking for a job again, we have to add them to the number of unemployed and to the number of the labor force. So as calculation, the unemployment rate will increase again. Why? Because there is a decrease in the number of discouraged workers. What is the conclusion? An increase in the number of discouraged workers leads to a decline in the measurement of unemployment rate. If the country enters into expansion again and discouraged workers started looking for a job again, the unemployment rate immediately will be a bit higher. We will understand we have a problem.